The next panel we're going to have is a mobile-focused panel. This panel is going to have Issac Roth on it from Strongloop, from the Node community. We've also asked Abe to join us, although we'll not cover the same ground. We'll give you some new questions. And we've asked Dion Almaer to join. Dion has a solid background in mobile from his time at Palm to his role right now as VP Mobile Engineering at Walmart Labs. And we also asked Max Lynch to join us. Max is the founder of a company called Drifty, which is focused on a framework for web development, for making web applications work as native applications on mobile devices. And I'll be moderating this panel. So to kick things off, Abe, we heard a little bit about how you guys are making money over at Sencha. I wanted to ask Max and Issac, if you guys could talk a little bit. Let's start with you, Issac. How are you going to make money? What's your offering at Strongloop? What's your plan?
Okay, so Strongloop is the data stack style company around Node.js. And this is very interesting because Node is such a phenomena. And people ask that question like, well, we just heard you can't make money in JavaScript. So
we're making money.
So as we've gone to first principles, as was suggested on the previous panel, and found out what are people doing with this and why does it matter, what problem can we help them solve, it turns out that the leading use case by far for Node.js in a commercial deployment is to create an API that speaks JSON to mobile and IoT devices. So if you use an app, it probably gets its data via JSON. Guess what? JSON's native to JavaScript. And Node makes a great backend for that. So by solving a set of problems around that use case, that's how we make money at Strongloop.
Okay. And what do you sell customers?
Oh, we sell them products, actually. So we have today two products. One is something that helps you manage your deployment of your API server, and it does things like put security around the API, scale the API. It offers multi-threading for your deployment. And it comes with support for the Node runtime itself, which is not a significant portion, but it's required because people need that. And we also have an API composer product, so something that allows you to create these APIs and connect the API to backend data sources like ATG Commerce Server, and like things that you just probably don't want to deal with as a mobile developer, but you have to if you want to get the kind of data that's going to make the mobile application really exciting. And that's what our products are.
Okay, great. And Max, at Drifty, you've created Ionic, which, as I understand it, is another in the line of frameworks that give you tools to make cross-browser web experiences that seem like applications. Could you tell us a little bit about how you plan to monetize that?
And it's freaking awesome.
Thank you. I mean, we're definitely earlier than most of these companies. So we have an entirely free open source framework, MIT licensed. It's probably as permissive as you can get. It's kind of scary. But we plan to monetize by using that as like the freemium layer and getting, ideally, like every mobile developer using Ionic to build mobile apps, and then getting into some of our really, really integrated backend services and tools that we have some history of building. So we've kind of pivoted the company into Ionic, but previously we had drag and drop developer tools with over 250,000 users in mobile. So we're kind of taking that experience and just kind of making a free framework that we can then get everyone into this ecosystem and have really, really easy to use, well-integrated services that will sell for a SaaS model.
Okay, so you're entering the market with Ionic. You see companies like Sencha and others that have been down this road, many of which have gone bankrupt or just never successfully monetized. What was it that made you feel like, here's an awesome opportunity that I want to chase after?
Probably getting my iPhone 5. Like, compared to the 3G I had, like the 5 kind of blew my mind at what was possible now with HTML5 on mobile. And you could do things that felt really native without having to write any native code. So I think what's different now than several years ago is our phones have gotten really, really powerful, and the tools for building applications in the browser have gotten really, really good. Like we base everything on AngularJS, which has kind of been like a revolution for front-end developers. And so that's helped us differentiate a lot. And we've also kind of taken more of a native approach to mobile development. Like, I really, really like the iOS SDKs. And I think a lot of web developers coming from jQuery don't really have that experience. So we've tried to take some of that really cool stuff they're doing and expose it through clean JavaScript interfaces and AngularJS extensions.
And I actually want to just jump in and give a plug for Ionic because it helps us sell our product. It is awesome. Like what it does is it makes you write your app in Angular, which is awesome, and then your app looks like it's native. And it doesn't look like a janky, I tried to make a native app, but I wrote it in, it doesn't look janky hybrid. It looks native. And people go, whoa. And the whole the whole hybrid idea that everyone wants to do in the enterprise because they can't hire enough iOS developers starts to become real simply because of how it looks. And then the way you develop with it is awesome too. But that moment where people go, oh, that's really cool. And like something changes for them. And so I don't know how you're going to make money on it, but it's awesome.
Thank you.
That's quite a plug. I got a couple of follow-up questions there. We've been hearing from you, Abe, for like the past 5 years or 4 years that web is here. Web is the technology we should be using, and that web is good enough for us to create applications that are native quality. But we've got lots of people who have come out over the years and said, that's not real. Most famously, Mark Zuckerberg, and I think Facebook has reemphasized that, but lots of other people have said, hey, web's not here yet. We want it to be, but it's not. And yet I'm hearing you guys say that, no, it's good enough. It's great. Are we finally at a point when we can go web that we don't need to use native SDKs? What do you all think?
Is this another HTML5 is ready? So we were on a panel, I think, at eBay, right? And you guys were poking and prodding me because I was the only HTML5 guy. I was on a panel with all native people. And
the licensing question's coming next.
Is it now? Okay. So, as far as HTML5 is concerned, you have to realize that it's not just the same implemented all across the board. So what we saw 4 years ago when we came out of framework that created native-like interfaces was that iOS by far had the best type of GPU acceleration that existed on across the mobile platforms. And what we saw on the other platforms was that they weren't there yet. Either sometimes the device itself wasn't shipping with a floating point operator, it wasn't shipping with a GPU, right? And these are the kind of things that you guys were at WebOS, right? So how'd that work out? All right, we'll go there. Touche. Inside jokes. Anyhow, so what ends up happening is that you have to wait until the underlying platforms mature enough. And I think the one that's been holding us back the most has been Android. And most of that reasoning has been that the Android rendering system has been pretty stagnant inside of the Android ecosystem, and why Chrome has kind of reinvigorated the HTML5 movement, because now they can actually ship outside of the Android ecosystem. So you can now start using that kind of code base on top of Android. So as far as the future for HTML5, it's super bright. I mean, we have enterprises that have standardized on Sencha, not just for mobility, but across the board for desktops. They're even building in-dash car applications. They're building apps for the television. And if you're going to try to tackle all of those different endpoints, you'll go crazy if you try to do it on their native SDK. So I think we can all agree that HTML5 is the only way that you can actually operate at scale. So when we talk to some of our customers that are building 400 or 500 mobile apps, right? It's not just one app, and they have to support, BYO policy of Windows Phone, Android, BlackBerry, iOS, and the like, and all the different profiles associated with that, whether it be a tablet or a mobile device. You cannot, it is like you run the numbers. You cannot maintain scale using native tooling.
Okay. So the guys with the conflict of interest say that the web is ready. Dion, I understand you guys are doing a lot with mobile at Walmart Labs, from what I hear. And you guys have opted to invest a lot in native stuff. The iPhone app is native, the Android app is native, yet you have a clear interest in using the web. Well, what's your perspective? Is it ready?
Yeah, so I think what we see in the news, when you hear Mark Zuckerberg talking about the biggest failure that he's seen, he's talking about something that started years ago, right? So I think that there's this constant trade-off where everyone wants the web to win. They want this unified platform. They want the ability to at least do the things that the web is great at, right? I want to be able to redeploy whenever I friggin' want and know that my customer has that latest version. Everyone wants that, right? So there's going to be maybe a race between the native guys going to be able to deliver that. And then on the flip side, you also want the ability for this to work fantastically offline, all the benefits you get in apps. When we started the mobile group, Ben was a part of that, so he knows this very well. We built a hybrid application, and we tried to push the boundaries on how to get the right level of experience while being able to tweak what was going on. And it was an incredibly enlightening and painful experience. Getting things to work on Android, to your point, was hellish. So this whole notion of leverage that, hey, I can just be a web developer and it works great, at the time was totally BS. It was totally wrong. Because in reality, you spent way more time QAing it, bug fixing it, and running into horrendous issues like we build applications for a brand in the UK where one of the most popular Android devices at the time, if you dynamically added a script, it would just blow up the entire thing. That's kind of like, you can't hack your way around that. Like, you are screwed, right? And so you fast forward to today, I think that we're still trying to work out what that right level of hybrid is. We're starting to see applications like we use Slack, for example, right? And if you use Slack across mobile and desktop, I'm not super excited about like this is the best feeling application in the world. It kind of drives me nuts that I can right click on something in the UI on the desktop and it says inspect element instead of like showing me what to do with it. Like there's a lot of things that are really infuriating, but those guys are able to move super fast and be able to get a lot of leverage. And it's at the point that I think for that application that it's good enough, right? If they can have a pace of features coming out that outpaces the delta of the experience, then I think the web has a chance of winning.
Abe, I'm really fascinated by what you said earlier in the last panel, that you're shipping your own WebKit engine on Android.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about how that's gone and your thoughts about whether or not you would think about shipping that same runtime on iOS, just so that you would make the same runtime consistent across both of those platforms?
So iOS doesn't let you ship an alternative runtime, so you're kind of locked into their web view. But one of the things that we're happy with is that it's best of breed, right? So there is probably not a better implementation of just web technology than what exists on iOS today, as far as a pure renderer. The second thing when it comes to Android development was that, yeah, everyone wants the web to win, but who's doing something about it? And eventually you have to get to the point where you have to say, this is the future that I've bet on, and I now need to take this flag and carry it forward, because if no one else is going to do it, who will? So you had to look, we had to look ourselves in the mirror and say, Android is not performant. The web UI view that a lot of people use inside of PhoneGap and the like is not at a stage where developers can feel happy about shipping their HTML5 app. So we went out and fixed it.
So as a salesman, you definitely have a great line about saying that iOS is best of breed, so it's great that we don't need to ship our runtime, but if you could, would you? Or are you honestly satisfied with what iOS forces you to use?
So, so on iOS, yes, we are actually very pleased with the kind of performance that we're able to get. There are features that we hope that will eventually be more performant or actually enabled, such as WebGL and a few other features that iOS doesn't have right now. But we're there. And what we've done with our product, with Space, which is basically the runtime, is that we've then augmented the renderer with a bunch of APIs that the consumer browsers don't have, like encrypted SQL database and encrypted file storage, right? So one of the issues that we see on the web is that many of the times you're passing around private keys. It's like include this private key inside of your JavaScript. That's not something that people can really do, right?
Disable the view source and you're fine.
Yeah, right, exactly. So what we do is we actually provide the kind of business requirements inside of our runtime that allows the developers to have that kind of seamless deployment, right? That we were talking about, right? Save, refresh, and you're done, and all of your customers have the latest code base. So that's what we're aiming towards, is having that kind of like instant feedback to your customer base, and not having to redeploy, repackage your application, republish it, so that your customer base may opt in or out of your tech. So,
well, Max, you and all of you on the panel sort of share one thing in common that I think is really fascinating. You all rely on runtime environments that you don't control. In your case, Issac, your competitor controls the runtime arguably more than you do. And I want to focus first with you, Max and Abe. Does it occur to you that Apple and Google have a strong conflict of interest to make the web runtime competitive with the native platforms? Do you view it that way? Do you think Google's incompetent execution on the web runtime and the SDK is just an accident? Do you think Apple's consistent sort of regressions in releases is just sort of an accident, or do you see some strategic element at play there?
Well, I don't know if Google really is incentivized to make sure the web is bad. I think they want and need, just like anyone else, building lots of applications for the respective app stores and making them high quality. And you see like shipping Chrome as an alternative to the embedded web view for Android 4.4, which you can kind of bring back to older versions, is a huge step forward. And that's like a sign from Google that they are really investing in web on mobile. In terms of iOS, I don't really know. I think it would be nice if they could do some of the stuff like, frosted glass effect. Like clearly they're not rushing to shove that into the web stuff. So I don't really know what they want to do with that, but so far we've been happy with the performance, and we've been able to emulate a lot of that. So I guess we'll see. I think the web standards just move more slowly, and that's good because we have a lot more stuff we can rely on, but we have to be a little more patient.
Issac, I want to talk to you a little bit about the dynamics that are happening. So your competitor owns the trademark to Node.js. There was this recent flap about the, encapsulated in the blog entry, the power of a pronoun that I don't know that we really want to go into.
We certainly don't.
More than anything, I just want to, how do you think about that when your competitor is such a powerful force in the Node community, arguably leading it? How do you view that?
Progress rages on. And I think that's the case, iOS, Android versus the web. And in our case, we have a trademark owner for the name Node.js who runs the project as a dictatorship, who have successfully managed to lose their top 3 contributors of all time successively over successive years. What are those people going on to do, and what is going to happen with iOS and Android? I mean, progress rages on. If you try to control something, if people want something else, it will happen. And what I see on the mobile side is that the CTO of any large company can't hire enough Android and iOS developers to maintain all the ports, and they're putting pressure on the vendors of the devices and the operating systems. Give me an interface, whether I ship my own, runtime, ship my own WebKit, which is only 8 megabytes, by the way, or whether I, whatever I have to do, get me a way that this works. And that is happening. Like, Node is now a movement that people want, and big companies are going to their major vendors and saying, I want Node, and I want it supported on this runtime, and like, you know what? Node is 14,000 lines of JavaScript.
I think one big difference between like the Node side and iOS is that Apple comes out with iOS 8 with some new UI gimmicks, and you're like, oh, like, what do you do there, right? Our native guys can go and just compile to the latest SDK. They get all this new sexy stuff. They get in the App Store featured. Apple can wield that, whereas with you guys, it's different, right? People don't want just, no, there's lots of things about it that they like, that if someone even forked it and did something else, say there's a fight with ES6 and, some people want those features and they don't, people can live on with that. Apple has way more control on the iOS side.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it has to do with certain contexts, right? So there's people that always need the latest awesome feature, right? Like if you're competing on your interface, you need maybe to use that cool widget or the transparent fade effect or whatever it is you're trying to use. But if you're building a field service application that's basically used by a captive set of people that are required to use that app, so the consumer-facing stuff where interface is a real deal, yes, that's an issue. But like you're saying, on the back end for stuff like Node or on employee-facing apps where the progress is not so needed, the value goes to a different place and people's requirements go to a different place, and they want something like cross-platform. And today what's going on in the Node community is that this kind of platform control that the trademark owner is trying to exert, where they say, hey, it runs best on Solaris, is just not accepted by the market. There is one major public site running on Solaris of all of the 10 big Node.js deployments like Netflix and PayPal and Groupon and all that. And that one is Walmart. But they're in the minority by a huge effect, and that we have nothing to do with that, but that's just kind of the force of the market.
So I want to go back to something that you guys were saying about Ionic. And if from what I heard about you saying why Ionic was so great was that it uses Angular, which is so great. And my problem with that statement is 9 months ago, you could have replaced that with Backbone, which is so great, which now kind of sucks. But
Sencha Touch.
And before that, it was, well, I don't know, it was Sprout Core before that, and before that, EXTJS and Sencha were awesome, and before that, and before that, and before that. And it seems like the web is sort of cursed in this world where you try to build some investment, you try to build some momentum, and it just changes so rapidly. You feel like you're sort of cursed to the dustbin of bad technical decisions just because you chose what was trendy. Do you see that changing? When are we going to get to a point where there's something stable we can build something meaningful on?
I think Angular is that one that kind of one that like. I mean, I think what you saw like jQuery won and it stuck around for a long time. We had a little shakeup at Backbone. There's some really great projects out there, like Ember is really great. But what you're seeing with Angular is like unprecedented adoption, not only with like small hackers, but with big companies. And like when that happens, you don't just move on to the next thing. Like that sticks around. And I think Angular's kind of hit that, and that's why we've invested in it. Like we spoke at the Angular conference, like they had a huge conference. Like this thing is becoming a big movement, and I think it's won this generation's.
But it's very polarizing, right? It's like a lot of people that don't like Angular really don't like Angular, right? I don't want these NG things, building this weird DOM within my DOM. I just don't want that. I want to go to a simpler solution and use, I don't know, React.js for this and not have a big, heavy framework around it too. And so who knows what's going to happen.
But in the so-called echo chamber of the valley, we're always using the latest stuff. But if you go into the Midwest, which is, by the way, where these guys are, what I see is that it's Angular and Backbone. And it's like if I've chosen an opinionated direction, which has certain benefits, I'm choosing Angular. And if I've chosen a less opinionated approach where I have more flexibility, I've chosen Backbone. And that is like it. I mean, on our SDKs, we've supported Angular and Backbone. And we now do stuff like offline sync and full stack JavaScript front to back, blah blah. And no one asks for anything except those two. So, although surely there will be a new thing.
Like what about the web components, right? Like if that eventually becomes real, we finally have a real component model. Can that spur on a new framework that works well in that world that totally blows away the need to do all these hacky things that we do now on the web?
Apple ripped that out. So.
Yeah, so, that doesn't necessarily change the role of the MVC. Right?
perspective on this is that we have 2 million developers on the platform. We're by far the leader in HTML5 applications, and what our customers are telling us is I don't need the whiz bang latest and greatest next way to build my app. What I need is something that's going to be around 10 years from now, because I'm building this one app and I need to make sure that's going to run 5 years from now. So for us to be a company that has found a business model that works, we've been in business now close to 7 years. We're growing, and to have large companies go ahead and standardize on us, not just for one application, but for 100 or 400 or 500 applications inside of that entire enterprise. Those are the kind of things that are important to me. So the architecture, can come and go. One day it's MVVM, one day it's MVC, one day it's just inline everything, right? But what's important for our customers is to ensure that there's a large community behind it, that there's support behind it, that there's someone that they can sue, there's a throat to choke, right? Those are the kind of things that people pay money for, at least on the JavaScript side. So that's where we focused our attention, is really going after the business. The business developer and focusing on their needs, as opposed to trying to stay trending.
I didn't get to that licensing question. We got to wrap up. I just want to ask one last question. So Isaac, for the longest time, Java and the web were synonymous, and we had a big period of investment on top of the runtime because Java was really ubiquitous. And since then, the server-side developers from that community have sort of been in a diaspora across a bunch of different platforms.
Good word.
Thank you. Do you see
Been
Node
waiting
as
all day
being
to say
sort of the second coming, sort of the aggregation of server-side developers again, or do you think Node will be one flavor alongside PHP and Ruby and a bunch of other server-side environments? How do you see it?
I don't know. I'll just tell you a couple things. JSON seems like it won. And JSON is the language, JSON's the language of mobile. It's sort of becoming the language of IoT, which is wild. And I don't know that means that Node wins, but I think maybe JSON won. And will we see like a many languages, or do we just see everybody move to Node? I don't know. But what we do see is that for the particular use case of mobile backend APIs, every platform out there, from Mule, who spoke earlier today, to big guys like Oracle and IBM, to the so-called MBASs, the mobile backends, they're all going to Node.js. And so at least for a certain use case, and PHP, like all the CMSs like WordPress, WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla all went to PHP. There's a use case around here, and we may see like a concentration of stuff around Node.js, and then maybe another one around other languages for particular use cases as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Dion.
Yeah, on the JSON thing, I think that if your biggest issue is like the format of the payload, like you're not building something interesting enough, right? So I think that is a bit of a red herring. There's like JSON 1, Node is the best at JSON. Like building something on the reactive platform is pretty easy to do the JSON stuff, right? I think it's actually the other pieces of Node that are interesting.
I wasn't trying to suggest that. In fact, I think I said that doesn't necessarily mean that Node wins, but it carries some momentum for JavaScript, which
An interesting data point.
Yeah, it's an interesting data point.
There's no getting around that JavaScript is the most optimized backend for dealing with JSON, although to your point, it's not that expensive to thunk between other formats. Listen, we could go on for a while. We're out of time.
Let's
Let's give a round of applause to our panelists.